If you've been podcasting for any length of time, then you have heard it said that one of the things you need to do to become successful as a podcast host is to master your craft. But what does that actually mean? And how do you actually do it? That's exactly what we're unpacking inside this episode with the one and only Jordan Harbinger, a podcasting icon who gets well over 15 million downloads a month to his show and who was named Apple's best and most downloaded podcast back in 2018. We're going to dig into the not-so-secret secret behind his success. So if you're ready to learn the exact strategies that helped him get there, don't go anywhere. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Hey, Jordan, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's an honor for me because you have had quite an interesting podcasting journey. In fact, you had your podcast before podcast analytics was even a thing. And you've talked about how not knowing the numbers actually made this experience so much more enjoyable for you in the early days of your show. So for new podcasters, or for even existing podcasters who might feel discouraged by low download numbers, how do you suggest that they keep at it, even if, and especially if, the listener count isn't where they want it to be yet?
When I first started the show, there was no such thing as podcast analytics. You couldn't measure how many people were listening. And people said, well, how many people listen to your show? And I said, I don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't actually know the answer to that question. And a lot of people said, oh, well, all right, I guess it doesn't matter. And I thought, oh, it's a hobby. Why do I have to ruin it by looking at the numbers and everything? I don't have to treat it like a business. And I liked it, and I worked really hard at interviewing, and I got better at prep and note-taking and reading and outlining and all that other stuff. And then they invented podcast analytics, and I obsessed over them. And I thought, is this really helping me create this? Not really. And then I started to focus on marketing and things like that. And I realized real quickly that you can focus on marketing something to the detriment of creating that thing that you're marketing. And it wasn't as appealing. And I know a lot of podcasters, just to stick with my own sort of craft here, they do that same thing to themselves. They'll start a show, they do 10 episodes or 5 episodes or 1 episode, and they're like, oh man, only 300 people listen to that. This sucks. I'm not having fun. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You had fun up until you knew how many people looked at it. Why is it different? People dance when they listen to music. Do you have to dance on a stage in order to enjoy dancing? I mean, I don't think that I should be dancing anyway. But the point here, that's neither here nor there, my lack of rhythm. The point is that people should do things for themselves, especially when they're just starting off, because you're working on that craft for your whole life. So why put the pressure on in the beginning? And we don't do this with other hobbies, especially with creative processes. This really comes into play, right? We don't do that. Nobody says, all right, I got to monetize my model train hobby. I got to figure out when I'm going to get paid to put Lego sets together, said no kid ever. So why are you doing that with your online business where you're crafting things and selling them on Etsy? Why are you doing that with your business where you're creating a podcast and you're talking to leaders and you're just enjoying every minute of that? Why does it matter if 100 people saw that or listened to that or 1,000 or 10,000? It matters because you're trying to monetize it, but outside of that, it didn't matter when you were creating it. So it really shouldn't matter to you at all, unless it's your only form of income, in which case you've already made several mistakes. If you're trying to desperately create a business and build an airplane after, what is that they say, like jumping off a cliff and building the airplane on the way down, like that's not how you're really supposed to build a business. So that's the way that I look at it, and not optimizing for those specific things, but optimizing for enjoying this craft and getting better at it has been a recipe for longevity in the industry. It's been a recipe for making sure the audience is taken care of, because they don't care how much you're making. They just care about the quality of the product. And it turns out that longevity and a good quality product just so happen to be the ingredients of a successful show. So you end up getting exactly what you want by focusing not on monetizing it, but focusing on the other elements of the craft.
That is such a key point. And, speaking of doing the opposite of what most people believe you need to do to have a successful podcast, you also made the conscious decision back in the early days to give away everything you teach for free, without a paywall, without having to opt in. This is before giving value away for free was cool and the thing to do. I'm curious, Jordan, what drove that decision? How did prioritizing this free content affect the trust and the growth of the listener-host relationship for your show early on?
Yeah, I was basically looking to figure out how to put conversations I was having with friends and other people that I was teaching in real life. I was like, where can I put these on the internet for other people? That was it. And then it started to get downloads from other places, and I thought, oh, weird. I thought we were just going to tell local people about this, not have it be downloaded by people in South Africa, Germany, and Canada. So, okay, let's turn it into a radio show that's kind of fun. And then it was like me and my friend having drinks in a basement and uploading the audio. And nobody in their right mind would have said, we're going to be huge. What are you talking about? YouTube didn't exist. There were no such thing as influencers. Twitter didn't exist. Where are you going to be huge? On the internet? That wasn't a thing that anybody was enjoying at that time. There was no such thing as being famous on the internet in 2006. Not really. In fact, if you were famous on the internet, it's because you were famous in real life. And you happen to also be famous on the internet. They didn't have online fame. And so that was really liberating, because the idea that we were supposed to be something we weren't that didn't make any sense. You might as well have said it was science fiction to build a business online and be famous. So it never was even on our radar. And that was also liberating, because we weren't thinking, all right, we got to do audience analytics and get metrics for this and figure out how to do these sales and all this stuff. We just weren't doing any of that. We didn't think about email marketing. And it's funny because a lot of our friends who we met through this, they were doing sales copy and online sales and sales funnels and affiliate marketing and all this stuff. And none of them really went anywhere. Some of them had moderate or even pretty good success, but they never really went anywhere because they were always just thinking about, how do I get another dollar out of everybody who is subscribed to my email list? How do I sell harder? And, audiences don't like that. They like that long term. And I remember talking with my original business partner. I don't have any business partners now, but my original business partner, and we were like, let's just give everything away for free. Let's not hide the ball like these other guys are doing. Let's not write copy that's like 3 amazing things you can only find out if you click here. Let's just never do that. It's cringe. It's annoying. A lot of people don't have money. Why do that? Like, let's just give it all away for free. And then I remember like 5 years into starting the show, all these online gurus were like, you need to give things away for free and then people will really trust you. And I was like, yeah, I said that in 2006, 2007, and everyone's like, you're an idiot. You give everything away for free. You need to put it behind a paywall and have a blinking red button that says click here to buy and a PayPal check. And I was like, nah. And then, of course, they all shifted to what we were doing, except they're still doing it wrong. It's like, it's still free, but it's really just a lead magnet. And then you have to do that. And I understand there are reasons to have sales funnels. I get that sales funnels have to exist. But a lot of people do it. It's an afterthought. I remember going to one conference and there was a talk about how to make your product in 20 minutes. And I'm like, but isn't this the thing that your whole business is based on? And they're like, yeah, but who cares? Just get it done as quickly as possible. Don't waste any more time creating your product when you can be spending the time optimizing your sales copy and your marketing funnels. And I just thought, this person must have churn and unhappy customers that you could line them up to the moon and back. There's no way this guy has a bunch of satisfied customers if he's spending 99.9% of his time marketing and the product is just an afterthought that he thinks he has to get out of the way as fast as possible. And I think a lot of people operate their business like that. When I look at it, I go, how can I talk to a smarter, more sophisticated, more intelligent, more discerning, more skeptical, more engaged audience? Not, how do I find the dumbest people on the internet and trick them into buying something from me? And I feel like so many online businesses operate that way. It's like, okay, I got to do this thing where it's not illegal, but it also works really well. And the best way to do that is to find rubes and market to them relentlessly and then run their credit card without permission until they threaten to sue me. Right? There's so many businesses run like that. And you can empower people without lying to them. And you can empower yourself and make money without lying to yourself.
So what would you say then to those podcasters who hear what you're saying about detaching from the outcome and finding joy in the process and seeing podcasting as a craft, but who feel torn because they actually do need the podcast to generate leads and to generate revenue?
Yeah, I'm with you on this. It's hard to tell somebody who wants to make money that they need to not worry about the outcome. I understand that. But on the other hand, the real secret to doing something fulfilling that you can do long term that ends up being something of value for a large enough audience is usually something that's fulfilling. If you're talking about a creative pursuit, that's the only way to do it. I don't know that many creators that create something that they don't really like because it makes a lot of money. I'm sure that there are a bunch of them out there. I think a lot of them have bad mental health and mental hygiene. Um, in fact, you know what? Do you know who Alex Jones is? The kooky guy um, he does like all those conspiracy theories, and he's in trouble right now. He's getting sued for $200+ million for harassing the Sandy Hook parents. He's just a terrible grifter. I think that he makes up his stuff. I think he just does it because it's lucrative, and I think he hates every second of it, which is why he drinks so much and does all these other things. And I think he's a miserable, unhappy person. And I think the reason for that is because he's selling every bit of his soul to make money, and it hurts other people, and he knows it, and he still can't stop because he's either addicted to the money or the attention or the fame or whatever, or all of it probably. And so you don't want to put yourself in a situation like that. And the way that you avoid that is you do something that's fulfilling and not just follow the money trail. I mean, I this goes for corporate people too. I used to be an attorney. I worked in finance, and I was like, this is never going to be something I love. And do I need to just grow up and realize that I'm never going to have a job that I love? And then I started the show, the podcast in law school, and I thought, there is this other thing I really like. Can I make a living doing that? Because if I can, I should just do that and not try and make high finance dollars, because I don't care about the money. I care about the fulfillment. It's much nicer. So I took a big risk when the economy crashed in 2008 and they sort of laid everyone off. Is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was like, well, now I can't stay here under the excuse that I need to pay for my student loans, or I can't stay at the law firm with the excuse that I'm eventually going to grow to find my place in that world because that's where the money is and blah, blah, blah. And I worked so hard to get here. I didn't have a choice. The choice was made for me. So I started to do the podcast and I got into radio, and I was like, I don't even care if I take like an 80% pay cut. I'll figure this out. And in the beginning, I did take an 80% pay cut. And now that's not a concern. I'm doing much better than any of the partners at any law firm really that exists anywhere in the world. And so, but I got there by doing something that was fulfilling. Now, have I got lucky breaks? Of course. Was I early to market? Yes. Did I end up building enough skill in this area? And I probably had maybe some natural building blocks to be a good talker? Sure. Who knows? It's hard to quantify that. But at the same time, I also knew that I didn't have what it was going to take to be naturally or even not unnaturally good at spreadsheets, financial calculations, documents, investment vehicles. I just didn't have the interest. I didn't have the interest, didn't have the passion, knew I'd never get there, could barely pay attention when people were even explaining to me how they work, let alone innovating in the space. And that was a big clue. And I think most people, they don't listen to those clues. They just do this thing that's paying the bills, and they think that's all there is because they weren't lucky like me to have started something that turned into a hobby that they loved in the beginning of their career. And people try and pivot, but they do it in a weird way. They go like, all right, I'm going to quit my job and go all in. And it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Don't do that. It's a whole separate rant. But a lot of these online influencers tell people like, go all in. What are you doing? And I'm like, what he's doing is paying rent and paying for food and not putting himself in a position where he has to make bad decisions because he can't afford to eat. And I think, I don't understand why, but I think a lot of these actually, I have a theory. A lot of these gurus tell people to do that. One, because telling people to take bold action is a way to sound confident without having any actual consequences if you're the person telling them to go do that. And two, if you're selling people courses and you say, take bold action, and then they quit their job, now they have to stick with you because they have absolutely no other option. And so it's kind of almost like a cult leader move, right? Like, oh, isolate yourself from all the naysayers, cut off your friends and family. Oh, look, I'm your only friend now, and I happen to be the guy who's got power over you and is taking your money. And I think a lot of online gurus do that same thing.
Well, Jordan, one of the things that I have always appreciated about you is your transparency and how you'll say, look, I'm not telling you how to think. I'm not telling you what to think, but I am going to ask the questions that most people are afraid to ask. So with podcasting, you've had some lucky breaks, but you've also had some rock bottoms. So, in talking about staying focused on showing up and on doing the thing that we want to become a master at, how do you personally keep yourself motivated when life throws you a curveball or when you're in a season that feels like rock bottom?
Yes, there's curveballs always. They tell you there's going to be curveballs. You get a curveball. You feel like you can't handle the curveball. You handle the curveball, rinse and repeat, right? So for me, I have to stay putting one foot in front of the other if I start getting stressed out. I'm like, when I get in those situations, I realize I'm like a blender with the top off, where there's a lot of energy, but it's just splashing upwards and all over, and you end up with a mess in the kitchen, and you're like, wow, I'm never doing that to myself again. You want to have that sort of laser energy instead, where it's like, okay, everything around me is just so chaotic and I can't really handle it. But instead of spinning around and exploding in the kitchen, I'm just going to make a list of the things I have to do today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, and the next day, and plan out my week. And then I'm going to go through that week. And it doesn't matter if by Friday I'm still 10 miles or 10 years away from my goal. I'm putting one foot in front of the other. That's what's happening. That's how I'm getting through this day or this week or this month or this year in this particular segment of my life in the business. And that's a really big relief for people like me. I'm not going to say that that's going to work for everyone. I think a lot of people maybe are wired differently. Who knows? But for me, I really need to feel like I'm making progress. And the way that you do that is by planning in advance, executing, and it doesn't matter where you are in relation to the goal. Because again, you are, and it's like those cliches, like you enjoy the journey and whatnot. You don't have to enjoy it. It helps if you do. But for me, I was like, okay, I still get to make my show. I still get to show up and create things that I love. And if I'm making half the money or 1/3 of the money or 1/10 of the money I was last year doing it, fine. Doesn't matter. I'm going to rebuild. And if I never get to where I was, fine. Doesn't matter. Still going to survive. Still going to be fine. Still doing the thing I love to do. And it's really easy to look at a setback and say, I have to be back at the top of that mountain I was just on. And that's the 0 point. And until I get there, I'm in the negative. And that's just not true. But it's really tempting to look at it that way when you get knocked off of your pedestal, right? Or wherever you happen to be. You think you're in the negative, but really you're just at the beginning. It again sounds like a Hallmark greeting card. You're just at the beginning of the next leg of your journey. It's an illusion that you were at the peak in the first place. And it's an illusion that you are needing to get back to that same place. Both of those things are completely not real, and they are actually just illusions you've made up in your head.
Yeah, well, Jordan, a lot of people preach this just don't quit mindset or mantra. But what they fail to mention is what activity you need to focus on when not quitting. Because there's a difference between continuing to not quit if you're doing dumb stuff that isn't actually moving the needle versus not quitting when you are in fact focused on the right activity. So if there was one thing that you focused on that you would say had the most impact on your ability to get where you've been able to get with your podcast, what would you say that one thing is?
I would say, I don't know if this is something I probably should have expected, of course, but your reputation, your network, the people you know, it's really the best insurance policy that money could never buy. And what I mean by that is when you think you've lost your business, you lose your house, maybe you lose some other element of your life, the people around you, if you still have your reputation, you're not accused of some horrible crime or whatever, like those exceptions aside, if you still have your reputation, you still have your friends, you still have the people around you, you'll be surprised at how many of those people will have your back, help you get back on your feet, help you move things forward. I mean, that stuff is really, really, really important. And you don't really realize that you are going to be able to lean on people until you try to lean on people. And most of us never have to lean on people, or at least we think and hope we're never going to have to. So in a way, any sort of big setback that allows you to reach out to those people in your life and get support and realize how many backers you really do have, how many allies you have, how many friends you have, how well you have done building your network and maintaining it. Any sort of setback that allows you to go and reach out and do that is actually kind of a blessing in disguise. Now, I'm not saying it's painless. I'm not saying you should be like, thanks for the knocking me on my ass. That's not necessarily the case, but you do get to see, wow, there are a lot of people that really want to see me succeed that I haven't talked to in years, that are reaching out of nowhere when they saw this thing that happened. That feels great because it makes you feel invincible, and it makes you realize that you're never really in this alone. You always have people that are willing to have your back. You just didn't even reach out and ask for their help because you never thought that you would need it, and you never thought that you could. So that for me was kind of a big lesson. When I had to sort of restart things a few years ago, you alluded to some setbacks. the first thing I did was call everybody I knew who I thought could help and explain my story. And I was really out there with my whole story, not trying to hide it out of shame. I was like, this is what happened. I have to start over. I need all the help I can get. Spread the word, tell your friends. And so many people did. And we were back on top just before you know it. And that was pretty darn cool. That was really, really, really cool. And it made me feel great. And it really eased my anxiety because I realized no matter what, I have all these people behind me, even though it feels like you're alone. You just can't see them, right? They're all behind you. And that was wonderful. So again, I always say prioritize the people around you, prioritize your relationships, your reputation, because it really is the best insurance policy that money could never buy.
It's such a great reminder, Jordan, and so true, just that you don't have to go it alone. Build a support network. Put the people around you who are going to support you in this. Keep focusing on mastering your craft. Put one foot in front of the other, making sure that people know you by your values and they align with those values and they appreciate you because of the values that you have. Jordan, thank you for being here and for sharing all of your wisdom with us today.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
And look, if you are listening right now and you have never checked out Jordan's podcast, please do yourself a favor and go listen to it. Go learn from him. We have linked his podcast in the show notes for you, or you can just simply type in the Jordan Harbinger podcast on whatever app that you usually listen to podcasts. And don't go anywhere, because in the next episode, we've got another podcasting legend joining us to talk about why your business needs a podcast and to show you how this law school dropout built a multi-million-dollar podcasting empire. And more importantly, how you can do it too. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.